Hi, it's Martin and Arlo, and we're back in the studio today for part 3 of this series where we are writing a bread recipe. Part 1 was baker's percentages. Part 2, we wrote the recipe. And today, in part 3, we're going to make Arlo's Cranberry Walnut Bread. So let's get going. Thank you. Okay, so let's do the mix. Arlo and I have written this bread that we're calling Arlo's Cranberry Walnut Bread, and just a couple of notes about the recipe. This is 75% white flour, and it was 25% whole grain, 20 whole wheat, and 5 of buckwheat, which we made into a stiff levain and which ripened overnight. I have my final mix water, I have salt and yeast, and I have the cranberries and the walnuts. And I toasted the walnuts. Anytime I have an inclusion like that, a lot of times I think about how can we get more flavor out of it. And we know that a toasted walnut tastes better than a walnut which is just raw, right? And so I've toasted those. Okay, so let's get started. First thing in the bowl is the final water. And there's that, thank you, sir. And then I have the levain, and again, this is whole wheat and buckwheat. And you can see the activity, it did really well overnight. Smell that, Arlo.
Whoa.
Whoa, right?
Sour.
Sour, very strong. Very strong, but that's gonna add incredible flavor to the mix. We ran a test of this yesterday, and we actually ended up changing the recipe very little. At the end of this video, I'm going to add a capture of the recipe proper so that you can look through it, and I'll probably talk about that a little bit at that point just so people can get a little bit more information about the changes that I made from our initial design. They were really small, actually. I lowered the hydration just a tiny bit, and we increased cranberries and walnuts just a tiny bit. I increased salt just a little bit above 2%. But like I said, I'll talk about some of those changes. This is the salt and yeast. And then I go with the flour. Now, these are the toasted walnuts and cranberries, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna dump them on top, and I'm gonna leave them. And when I come back for the first fold, so for the bulk fermentation for this dough, I'm going to give 2 hours. I'm gonna give 2 hours, and in the first hour, we're gonna fold it 3 times at 20, 40, and 60 minutes. And then the second hour, we'll leave it untouched. If you decided to make this recipe without any commercial yeast, you could probably give 3 hours of bulk fermentation, and that would be okay. I would still give the 3 folds in the first hour. So we're gonna let this sit for 20 minutes, and then we'll come back and fold it, and you'll see how the cranberries and the walnuts will become incorporated, and it'll be homogeneous. Okay, so we'll be back in 20. Okay, so it's been about 20 minutes and we can fold this dough now. So we have the cranberries and stuff on top, and I'm gonna show how I would go about getting those in. So what I would do is, I would actually just take my hand and push it into the dough. See how I'm like making some holes in there almost? Mm-hmm. See how that works?
Yep.
And then I just go around the side and I turn the bowl. Kind of like folding, right? I'm literally folding them in. We'll do that for a minute?
Sure. So.
Yep. And you can be aggressive and kind of like rough with it a little bit. You can push your hand into the dough when you're doing this and really get stuff in there. You just keep working it for a minute. You feel how strong that dough is already? Mm-hmm. Just as it sits. That looks good. That's good enough. We could go a little bit further if you wanted at this point. I'm like pulling it up and pressing it down. Pulling it up. See how I'm doing that? Pulling it up, pressing it down. You could do that. You don't have to. I kind of like the way it feels, so maybe I do it more than I need to even. And then I just turn it over, and it's mostly homogeneous. But we're going to fold it 2 more times. We're going to fold it 2 more times. So we'll set a 20-minute timer, and we'll come back and we'll give it another fold before we have it rest before the divide. Okay, good. Okay, so this dough has now had about 40 minutes since we mixed it, and it's ready for its next fold. We won't show the whole folding process, like we won't show it at 60, but I wanted to just show this one because I think it's cool to see how much the dough has developed. So get your hand wet and then go around the bowl doing that. Pull up and pull it from underneath. There you go. Get your hand wet again if it starts to stick. Do you see how much more stretchy it feels from the first one, right?
Totally.
Do you feel it, how it might have risen just a little bit too?
Yeah.
Softened some. Yeah, good. So pulling up and pressing down. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Good. Working your way around. Working your way around.
Mm-hmm.
Pulling up and pressing down. That's a fold. You know that.
Yep.
And then sometimes what I like to do, just because it's a little tidier, is to actually turn it so that the smooth side is on top.
Yeah.
And then we're done. Good job.
Yeah.
You were a master.
Someday.
Thank you. Okay, so we're ready to divide. This dough has had, actually, I only scheduled it for 2 hours, but it's had more like 2.5, maybe even a little bit more than that. I did put it in the fridge for a little bit just to slow it down because I knew that we would need some flexibility here. Okay, so anyway, look how pretty the dough is. Do you see the buckwheat in there? It's almost speckled. Do you feel how it's like soft and sort of marshmallowy a little bit?
Definitely.
Definitely ready to divide, right? Okay, so let's dump it out on the counter. So initially we had said that we were going to make these loaves 600 grams, but then when I tested them yesterday, I thought, can you set that in the sink? Thanks. I thought I wanted a little bit more crust to crumb, so the slice was a little bit big, and I think it would be nicer to have more crust because the crust is so super flavorful. And so we reduced the loaf size down to 500 grams, and when I shaped them, I made a little bit longer today than we did yesterday when they were a little bit wider. So this should be about a kilo of dough, which means we should have 2 loaves at about 500 grams, 72. Okay. Do you want to just gently gather that as a round pre-shape for me, pretty please?
Weird gathering something with like stuff inside of it.
Yeah, right. The cranberries really came out really flavorful though, right?
Yeah, they did.
It's like super piquant. So you don't have to do it too tightly, just kind of, because this dough is a little bit stiffer than some of the doughs that you've worked with, it doesn't take much, just a little bit of a gathering like that. Yeah, that's good. See how much tighter yours is than mine?
Yeah.
So that's okay, but what we want to do is we want to try and have them be as equal as possible, because that way they'll be able to shape at the same time and go in the oven at the same time. Anyway, this is going to be good and perfect. So we'll come back in a few minutes when it's time to shape. Awesome. Okay, so these have relaxed for, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes or so, something like that. 10, 15, 20, it doesn't matter. I mean, if the dough doesn't feel like it's running away, so I think that it's fine. It could have maybe even taken a little bit longer. So that's the one that you pre-shaped, I can tell, and that's mine, which is a little bit looser. I'm gonna give you the tighter one. I think that might be a little better. So let's just do this side by side. I grabbed a little bit of flour. Yep. This is the seam side. Yeah?
Is this the seam side? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the seam side. So do you see how I've kind of patted it like a little bit east-west? Does yours look just like mine?
Nope.
Not yet, right? So I want it to look just like mine. See how I'm a little bit like rectangular? Okay, so that looks pretty good. Just a little bit of flour. Okay. We're just gonna roll it down like this. So 1. And is it even left to right? Make sure that you're even left to right. And do it again. 2. Yep, hands as paddles. Yep. Good. And make sure that it's even left to right.
Super even.
Not super even. It's okay. It's gonna be fine. If it feels like it's a little sticky, go grab yourself some flour, a little bit, not too much, not too much, just a wisp of flour.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna come down for the last one. And only press with the pressure that's required to seal it. You don't want to mash it. If you mash it, you will make the dough sticky, like your hands will stick to the dough. Okay, now go to the middle and roll it for just a second without any pressure, basically. And then go to the edges and just give a little bit of a pointy. Yeah, now you're good. Now go to the edges, just to the edges. Yep, and keep it rolling back and forth. Look, roll it. Roll it, and then apply pressure while rolling. Roll it and apply a little bit of pressure. Yep, but you have to keep rolling as you apply the pressure. There you go, there you go. Get that end a little bit more pointy. There we go. Now look for your seam. There's my seam. Whoop, you see your seam?
It's okay here.
Yep, okay. So put it on the couche. This is our floured linen. There we go.
It's not too bad.
There's a seam right there, yeah. Perfect. And then just make sure that it's sort of swaddled, right?
Uh-huh.
And then we'll put them like that. And that's gonna proof for probably 45 to 60 minutes, depending on what the weather's like. Today, in Vermont, it's only 65 degrees. Yesterday, it was like 80 something or something, so it proofed very fast. So depending on ambient conditions. Okay, so we're gonna let that proof a little bit, and then we'll be back. Awesome, good job. Okay. Let's get ready to load. Yeah, bring those down here. Okay. Yeah, I chilled them a little bit. So we're ready to load, and these are the loaves that were shaped earlier. I knew that we might not be on schedule today in spite of some attempts to be on schedule. And so I used the refrigerator as my friend. Once I had shaped the loaves and I felt them after they had risen for maybe 20 minutes or so, I said, they feel like they're gonna move real well. And so I covered them and put them in the fridge and just took some heat off them. I cooled them down a little bit to slow them some. So the fridge is a good tool for pausing things. Okay, turn that over.
How are we gonna score these?
Yeah, good question, huh?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna show you with my finger how I'm gonna score them. Just making sure that they look pretty, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of our last chance to make them look pretty. Okay, so I'm gonna bake them on a baking stone in this oven. The oven's preheated to 500 degrees. I know that this oven runs 50 degrees cool, and I have an oven thermometer in there, so I'm actually loading about 450 or so. I have a cast iron pan in the bottom of the oven, which has been preheating for an hour. And so when I add water to that, it's gonna create a lot of steam, right? You've seen all this stuff before. I have my lom. The lom is the piece of metal, the handle, and I have a razor blade on the end of it because I like to score bread. And so how are we gonna do this? Yeah.
Like this?
Yeah, you know, you could
Three of them,
do a lot of different things. Yeah.
Or just like one down the middle.
You could do one down the middle. You could do a lot of cuts kind of like this, what I call like the barber shop.
Mm-hmm.
You could do like a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and do like a crosshatch.
That'd be cool.
Okay, I think I'm gonna do the crosshatch. Do you want to do just a bunch of them and just go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that?
Sure.
Do you have a preference?
No.
Do you want me to go first, or you want to go
You
first?
go first.
Me first. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think I'll do the crosshatch. So I like to have the bread on an angle like this when I cut it, And I'm gonna hold the paper so that it doesn't slide around. And this blade looks pretty good. Maybe I'll just flip it real quickly and just make sure that it's, you wanna have a nice sharp blade. The reason I like the lom like this is that I can replace the blade. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3.
That's good.
That should be pretty, right? Okay. So for you, you can do this without cutting first if you want. If you just want to like drag it lightly just to see sort of where you're gonna go.
Okay.
You want to do that, and then we'll go back and cut.
So pour it like this.
Yeah.
Is that spaced enough?
Yeah, that's pretty good spacing. You want to make sure that they're evenly spaced and that they're all at the same angle. So evenly spaced, all at the same angle. Yep. Okay, now I'll go back and do it and cut through it this time, cut through the skin. Yep, so a little deeper. Great, great, good. Do you see how you got through the skin? That's good,
Yeah.
that's good, that's what you want. You got through.
This one was the best.
Yeah, that was good. These all look good. Everybody looks good. I see one spot where I might clean mine up. Okay, so before I go in, I want to grab my mitt. I'm going to grab my water. Okay. There you go. Don't want to load that. You keep an eye on that razor blade for me, okay?
Okay, I'll just put it in its
Yep,
sheath.
yep. And watch out, hot behind you.
Okay.
So slide this on. Okay. Okay, that'll probably bake for 30 minutes, a little over 30 minutes, maybe 30 minutes to 34 minutes. I don't know. We're gonna bake to full color and we'll come back and have a look at it when it's done, and maybe we'll even taste some. Okay, awesome. Thank you. We should be getting close.
Looks good.
What do you think about the color?
Looks really good.
We're just over 30 minutes. You know, bake time varies by oven. Bake time varies by oven. You have to use your eyes and your ears, your nose, your hands. Some people like to use a thermometer. I don't find that very helpful. But these look good, right? So let's have a look. Color is good.
Yeah.
Feels firm.
Uh-huh.
I think your cuts came out really well.
Yeah.
Yours opened really, really nicely. Smell it.
Smells good.
Super good, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's let these cool for a little while. They should cool for quite a while, but we'll let them cool a little bit and then we'll come back and taste them. Okay, good. Good job.
Yeah.
How's it smell?
It smells really good.
Super good. I can smell the walnuts quite a bit. Let's, you know something cool about any bread with walnuts is that the longer that the dough sits in contact with the walnuts, the more purple it becomes.
Whoa.
Yeah, so if we had refrigerated this dough overnight, the crumb would be really purple. There's something about the reaction with the walnut skins. Pretty cool, huh?
It smells so good.
Smells good. Smells piquant.
Yeah.
Great. So this is the conclusion of the third video in this series, where we started with a little bit of information around baker's percentages or baker's math, and then with Arlo's help we wrote a formula, and then today we baked it. And I hope that this gets you down the road a little bit closer to sort of understanding how formulas come together. And I feel like we've just sort of begun the conversation. There's a lot to cover, and hopefully this will help. After this, at the end of the video, I'm going to go through the formula a little bit more in depth with you in case you have questions or want to see more how it works. But in the meantime, I guess the other thing that I wanted to say was that baking for us is about community, and it's great to be able to share this time together with you and with Anthem as well. And I would encourage you to do some baking and get to know your community and share some of this abundance that you may have access to if you're baking at home. So, cheers and good job. I think this is a delicious bread,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
Really good. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Anthony. All right.
Good crush.
Okay, so let's talk through Arlo's Cranberry Walnut Bread. I have this in a spreadsheet. This is a Google Sheet. You could use any spreadsheet program. I use it as a calculator, and it works really, really well. So I guess let's just start up in the upper left corner here. So our batch is 1 kilo. That's 2 loaves at 500 grams each, and that gives us a batch size of 1 kilo. We could change that to anything we wanted. We could put 18 there, and if we wanted to make rolls, we could do them at 80 grams a piece, and that would give us a batch size of 1.44. But for now, let's leave it at 2 at 0.5 because that's what we did yesterday. Okay, so this is the total formula area of the spreadsheet. This is everything that will go into making these loaves, all components, sum of all parts. In the top 3 rows, we have flour, so that's all purpose at 75%, whole wheat at 20%, and buckwheat at 5%. That's the total flour and formula, and it should sum to 463 grams for this batch size. Water is 75. It was initially 80. I lowered it to 75. I think it probably needs to be somewhere in between. And the beautiful thing about this is that you can change these numbers on the fly and everything will update, so it makes it super, super handy. Salt was initially 2%. I changed it to 2.3. We have these extra things in here, walnuts and cranberries, and you need to salt everything that goes in, and salt is being driven off the flour amount only. So when you add extra things like a soaker or some amendments, I usually increase the salt just a little bit. 2.3 is probably good. I have a sourdough culture line in here, and that's just to capture the amount of culture that's needed over here in the pre-ferment to initiate fermentation. So it's just 12 grams, which will be used to build this pre-ferment. Walnuts and cranberries, when we initially wrote it, I put 15 in for each of those, and when we ate it, we thought, nah, that could go up a little bit, so we went to 18. You can do whatever you want. So a total of 25% of the flour in this recipe is pre-fermented, and as we noted before, I'm going to pre-ferment all of the dark flour or all of the whole grain flour, so the whole wheat and the buckwheat. I'm going to pre-ferment 25%. Those numbers come right over here. The spreadsheet as a calculator works left to right. It works left to right. And so when you use an amount, like we've used the whole wheat and the buckwheat, then there'll be a 0 value here in these fields. So for the stiff levain, let's cover that. So whole wheat, buckwheat, water at 70%, so it's kind of stiff, and then 10% sourdough culture as a percentage of flour. And that pre-ferments, or that ferments for about 12 to 18 hours. The sum of all those parts, 208 grams. And you'll see over here in the final mix column where everything comes back in, but I'll get to that in just a second. So 12 to 18 hours after we set our pre-ferment, we have our final mix. And because we didn't use any all-purpose flour, that amount, 347 grams, comes straight across. We used our whole wheat and buckwheat, so there's no value there. The water, this cell will be 347 minus 81, which is 266. We didn't use any salt in the pre-ferment, so 11 grams comes straight over. We didn't use any yeast, so that comes straight over. This is dry instant yeast. You'll notice that when we wrote the formula initially, I was a little bit higher with the yeast. I went down a little bit, and that is optional. You could extend bulk fermentation and make this bread deliciously without any additional commercial yeast. It's just 1 gram, very small amount. And then walnuts and cranberries come straight across, and the levain amount comes up from right here, 208 grams. And when we sum everything, it comes out to 1 kilo. And again, if I updated this, if I change that from 2 to 20,
I would have a 10 kilo batch, and you'll see how all of those amounts automatically update. It's the beauty of using a spreadsheet. I'll quickly walk through the process just in case people are interested. So the pre-ferment on day 1, set and ferment for 12 to 18 hours. Day 2, in a large bowl, combine water and stiff levain, add the salt and yeast and flour, mix until homogeneous, and place the walnuts and cranberries on top of the dough. Those will get incorporated during folding. Desired dough temperature 76 to 78. Fermentation, 2 hours of bulk fermentation with folds at 20, 40, and 60 minutes. Again, if you decide to leave out the commercial yeast, you'll need to add some time there, maybe an hour or so. Divide to desired weights, pre-shape and rest for 15 minutes. Shape and then place in a floured banneton. You could put them on couche as well. Doughs may be baked after a final rise. Final rise about 45 to 60 minutes, something like that. Or you could put them into a cold place for 12 to 16 hours if you wanted them to be long cold fermented. And then the bake was just 450 Fahrenheit for 30 to 35 minutes. It says deck, that just basically means on a masonry surface, and steam is a yes. I think that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, just throw them in the comments. I'll keep my eye out, and I will check in as needed.